What I'm going to do is, the question is, tell us about a surrender you have had after getting sober. And we will start with ladies first.
Hi, I'm Shauna. I'm an alcoholic. And my mind is completely blank right now. It's past my bedtime. Oh my gosh. So, surrenders that I've had since getting sober. There have been a lot, that's for sure, and I didn't really think about that. It's been really compartmentalized for me to think about letting things go and turning things over to God. It didn't happen all at once, that's for sure. I think that a lot of the choices that I made in the first few years in recovery were just kind of, I don't know what I was doing, honestly. Everything felt still really crazy and chaotic. Like inside of my head, it still felt like there was like a football stadium in there for a long time. And it took a lot of step work. It took a lot of meetings. It took a lot of starting to develop the relationship with God to just start to calm down a little bit. Because like a lot of the speakers that have already spoken, I was like this just tightly wound ball. And you're distracting me. I was just like this tightly wound ball, and it took a long time for things to start unraveling and for it to like actually occur to me that there were more things that God could help with than just alcohol. And one of the big things that I did in recovery that sort of opened my eyes to the fact that I was still running on self-will a lot, I'd gotten my kids back, and I took a job that put me working out of town like almost all the time, and my kids moved back in with their dad, and like my sponsor had tried to talk to me about it before I accepted it, and like a lot of people tried to say, are you sure that's what you want to do? And I was sure that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't see that I was still trying to like make up for all these things, all these ways that I felt not good enough. And I felt like if I took that job, it was going to mean that I was important and that I was helping people and that I mattered and I was visible in the recovery community and all these sorts of things. And so I took that job, and it really set me backwards in what I really was trying to achieve in recovery, because, a lot of the motivation to get better was for my kids. And I only kept that job for about a year, and then I was back locally, and there wasn't any real long-term damage done to the kids at that time, but I did have to start over on reconciling with them and getting them back in my house. And so just realizing that how true it really was for me that selfishness and self-centeredness was the root of everything, that everything that I did was just so ego-driven and had been my whole entire life. And so I was able to just kind of take that to God and really start to listen to what felt true to me, because the coin always, it says on the back of it, to thine own self be true, but I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what it meant to be true to myself, because I just kind of did what I thought was expected of me, and I did what I thought was expected of me, and I did the next thing I thought people expected me to do. And that was one of the things that I really started to slow down and look at what my inside voice was telling me, and like noticing what it felt like to go against my own true self. And yeah, that's all.
We will go with the youngest now, Matt.
Everybody, my name's Matt, and I'm an alcoholic. Truly grateful to be here clean and sober. The older I'm getting, I like the early meetings. I can't believe I'm up here at 10 o'clock at night. My surrender in sobriety this go-around, I think, is, I'm going to backtrack a little if that's okay. I'd gotten sober in August the 17th of 1998, and I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the ego being the way that it is, I either have to be the wellest in the room or the sickest in the room. I don't know how it is to be another guy in the room sometimes, and so I grabbed a hold of sobriety, and I grabbed a hold of this thing, and I really got down to brass tacks, and life showed up, and God showed up, and things began to happen, and I lived a wonderful life of sobriety for until about 2011. In 2011, I was a diesel mechanic for most of my life, and I'd hurt my back, and not to get too far into outside issues, but I went to a doctor and got prescribed something, and the next thing you know, but with a mixture of that and a mixture of some things that were going on in my life, and the fact of the matter was that, towards the end of that, I had the job, I had the beautiful wife, I had the home, I had the cars in the garage, in the driveway, the swimming pool, and all of a sudden Matt's taking credit for the things that are going on in Matt's life. And I forgot that the gift and where the gift came from. And so at 13 years of sobriety, I started popping pills, and took about 2 years, and then because it was the next thing to do, and I am an alcoholic of the hopeless variety and a real alcoholic, but because it was the next thing to do, I ended up drinking again. And as Bill talks about in his story, and he said the doctor came in and finding mixing both sedative and alcohol, and he said, and this combination soon landed me on the rocks. And I didn't know what that meant until I'd experienced it for my own. And I walked into probably one of the most insane times of my life. My relapse lasted for 8 years. I think for a lot of times is this thing that I think that gets taken for granted, or at least I took for granted. This idea of the comment that we make in AA a lot of times about just keep coming back or to come back. And there was that thing inside of me that I could not get back into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was in and out of treatment. I started showing up in mental institutions. I started doing all these things. And it was all wrapped around this thing. And to me today, it's like step 3 is the most poignant part of my program because of the fact that I was trying to do all this on my own power. And so it was just a crazy, crazy time. And like was shared this evening, I destroyed about everything I came in contact with. My wife, who I'm going to call her out, just celebrated 30 years on the 5th of this month. She stuck in there with me and went to Al-Anon and did her thing, and she stayed. But like it was talked about, I destroyed and hurt everything I come in contact with, and so through a weird series of events, I ended up back in treatment, and so this was on February the 27th of 2019. And the thing was that I would come into the rooms, and because I had so much book knowledge, I would sit in the Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and you guys would say stuff, and you'd misquote the book. Or you'd say that step like this, and that was wrong. And so, what I'm saying? All these committees going on in my head, and I could not hear the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't hear it. And I had a sponsor, and one of my closest friends in AA was just, he said, why don't you just sit down, shut up, and do what we tell you to do. And God threw me into a mix of gentlemen that one of them had 14 years, went back out. One of them had 15 years, went back out. One of them had 12 years and went back out. All have double digits again, and God threw me right in the middle of those 3 men. And so I started working with the sponsor, and for about the first, probably 9 months, I would come and I would sit in AA meetings, and I would sit on my hands, and it was everything I could do just not to drink. I didn't know if I could stay or not. And I just couldn't hear what you guys were saying. I couldn't hear the voices. I couldn't hear the message. And I just kept praying about it. And I was crying to my sponsor about it, and I couldn't hear what was being said. And I went into a meeting one night, and I'm sitting on my hands, and I'm just ready to start that battle going on in my head. And I heard the music of AA. And see, I didn't think I was going to get that, because see, I'm a guy that drinks or uses no matter what. And the mere fact that the biggest miracle in my life today is I'm standing in front of you clean and sober. That is the biggest miracle by far. And the lesson that came for me today is that I had to totally surrender at a level I had never surrendered before. And what that looked like for me, and what was so eloquently said earlier tonight, was this thing was that I had to go to God and with these things in my life. And it was because I was under the idea that years and years ago, my sponsor was going through the book with me, and he said, I want you to read pages 60 through 62. And this was years ago. And I read those pages, and I went back to him, and I said, this is exactly how I am when I drink. When I drink. And he started laughing his ass off. He's like, no, Matt, you're missing the point here, because I didn't think I was all that selfish and self-centered, right? So, and we go through this thing, and I come back and about give him, I thought that God just wanted my alcoholism. I'll take care of everything else. And that's what it looked like for me. And so through this and through this relapse and through the pain and through the things that I had to walk through that process, when I got back here this time, I did what you told me to do, and I sat on my hands and I shut up and I did what you told me to do, and little by little, these little miracles began to happen in my life. I couldn't turn wrenches anymore because of my back, but I ended up getting a job where I worked breakdowns over the telephone. I did that for 2 years, and God said, I got something else I want you to do. And then I went and got a certificate that allowed me to go into hospitals and help people like us get help. And I stuck that out for a little bit, and the next thing you know, I had another treatment center call me, and they said, we want you to come to work for us. And I want you to know, and then after being there for a little bit, they came to me again, and they said, we want you to be the director of this position in our facility. And I'm not telling you that because what I'm saying is that what happened was I didn't fill out the first application. When the doors open of themselves to me today, they seem to be of God. It's when Matt tries to push the doors open that they seem to be of me. And if I let God open the door and I walk through it, I finally see what you guys have been trying to tell me all along. God's got this thing. God's got it. All I have to do is step through the door when He opens the door. I had somebody tell me one time, I think it was Tammy was talking about that, with just close your eyes and jump. And that's what I was able to do. And, God just continues to show up and be there. And I live a life that better than the 13 I had before. And it's because of this idea that I had to get out of the way and surrender everything that I have to this power greater than me. And it turns out that as a result of doing that, God takes care of all the details. Thank y'all very much.
Hey everybody, I'm Ryan, I'm alcoholic. Thank you all for coming out tonight, I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for sharing before me so I had some time to think about what I was going to say. So, surrenders in recovery, this is a wonderful topic. I think for me, long-term recovery is really just a continued series of surrenders in different areas of my life, and I'd like to share a few with you. I think the most impactful one was maybe when I was 5 years sober. I was Mr. AA. I was the GSR. I'd go to all these meetings. I'd sponsor all these guys. I'd go to the treatment centers. I was the poster child for Alcoholics Anonymous because I'm scared to death of what you think of me. If you think I'm doing a good job, then I feel good about myself. I need that external validation to feel okay being me. And you know what? You know what's a tough thing to do is to live dirty in AA. To start living dirty, speaking recovery in a meeting and living dirty when you leave the room. I don't know about you guys, but most people with long-term sobriety go through this phase, and I certainly did. I started having, inappropriate relationships with a married newcomer, and that just set the spiral going for me, man. And I went to an emotional low. And really, what I was doing is playing God the whole time, really. But I'm very thankful that the men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous told me what to do and showed me what to do when I got to the point, because God's grace is at the end of self-will, and I was absolutely trying to run the show myself, and I didn't realize it, right? I was like in the eye of the tornado. It was calm and everything looked normal, but outside my life's falling apart and I don't even realize it. And it was when I was surrendered by this lifestyle, and it wasn't just the sexual stuff. It was, I was living for money, and I thought that if I get the next thing, the next trip, the next degree, then I'm really trying to satisfy my hunger inside by taping sandwiches to my body, right? And that's where I am in 5 years sober, right? And I'm miserable, right? And my life's starting to look really good on the outside. Everybody thinks I'm doing great, man, but I'm dying on the inside. And I'm seeking everything but God to fill that hole inside of me. But you know what? You guys were here for me, you guys, and the only reason I was comfortable enough to go to you all was because I had heard this story from the podium multiple times. The second surrender, the third surrender, and it's always the surrender to self, right? I have to continue to surrender to self. The first surrender to alcohol is easy. Not easy, but you guys know what I mean. Like the second surrender, it just brought me to my knees, God had me in the palm of his hands, man. I just had to stop squirming. And some other things that, how did I get out of that, right? So I brought you down there, right? How did I get out, right? Same way I got out of my active alcoholism, right? I redoubled my efforts. I got back into work. I finished my amends, right? We all hear about it, resentment's the number one offender, but I've heard said from multiple tapes and multiple people that I look up to is that, unfinished amends is right behind it, and I don't know about you guys, when I first went through my amends, I checked a few names off the list and I started to feel good, and Ben told me, he said, you're settling for relief when you really need recovery. And I don't know about you guys, but how many of you fold that 8-step list back up and put it in the folder after you make a few and you say, all right, let's go, prayer and meditation, I'm just going to sponsor guys now, right? And I didn't finish the work, and I was wondering why I was miserable, so I got back into this thing, and with a new yearning, a new earnestness to really grow and to get closer to God, right? And the same solution that worked for my alcoholism worked for my other problems, right? And another thing that I've had to really work on look at is my old ideas, right? My old ideas. I think as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's imperative for me to regularly evaluate what I think is true, right? Because the truths that I hold in my heart continually drive me. They drive me at work, they drive me in relationships, they drive me in recovery. What I think is true, just because I think it's true doesn't mean it's actually true, right? And I really handicap myself by thinking that just because it was taught to me as a child or because my parents did that's true. And it's important for me to really look at these things, and through God and good sponsorship, and I've been able to kind of open my eyes and evaluate some of these old ideas, and I don't want to go too long, but a couple of the old ideas that I have is that if I can make the outside look good, then I'll be okay on the inside. It's the same age-old concept, right? But I didn't realize I was doing it in recovery. I thought that if I can make this much money, if I can get this degree, if I can go on this fishing trip, if I can get this girl, if I can do this, I'll be okay. It's the same story, different podium, right? But I had it in sobriety, right? And that's a tough spot to be in, right? We get here when we're drinking and we go through that, right? But when I'm stone cold sober, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place, man, and I have nowhere else to turn but to God and the steps. And, I don't really know what else to say about that, but for me, I'm just really thankful that the members of Alcoholics Anonymous were graceful with me. They didn't beat me over the head because I was making mistakes in AA, and that's been my experience since I walked through the doors. When I first came to AA, they stuck their hand out and they said, kid, if you want what we have, do what we do. They didn't beat me up. They didn't tell me what to believe. They let me make my own mistakes. And I have to be cognizant of that, because when I sponsor new guys, do I let them make their own mistakes? Because I had my most amount of spiritual growth when I make mistakes in Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's just what I was thinking about. Thanks.
Are we on that camera? Yeah, they do. That's the new filter. We don't really look this good, or I don't. They do. Okay, so the second question. Ooh. Tell us about example of forgiveness that's happened in recovery for you. And we'll start with Ryan.
We're all going to get it. I'm Ryan. I'm back. So let me introduce myself, so really I can have a little time to think about the question. My sobriety date September 28, 2010. I initially got sober in Kingsport, Tennessee. I grew up in New Jersey. I currently live in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I have a home group. It's the Spirit of Recovery group. We meet Monday and Fridays in Bowling Green at 6 o'clock. And I have a sponsor, and I sponsor other men, and I still don't know what I'm going to talk about, so let me just see what God's going to say. An example of forgiveness in recovery for me. So I think the biggest one that I had was resentment towards my father. And same thing. It's all going to be the father, mother, whatever, boyfriend, husband. It was probably my father. I grew up in an alcoholic household, and, I was never abused or anything, but my parents were always drunk, and I just watched my dad just continue on this path of active alcoholism. And, he tried his best to support me and be there for me, but he chose to drink over me every time. And I can say that now. I know he lost the power of choice whether he was going to drink or not. I get that. But at the time when I'm a kid, I just see like, man, I'm not, and it leads to all these feelings of inadequacy, which unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, have reinforced all of my character defects now. They all stem from this feeling of inadequacy. And anyway, so, my dad's doing his thing, and, I was resentful at him. I was resentful. I come from a divorced family, and I don't have this like trauma from childhood or anything, but I really resented my father when I came to AA, and I think that's the biggest way that I was able to make that right. Well, let me back up a bit. So the only way that I can really forgive is through the amends process for me. I had to be able to see where my mistakes were in that relationship, right? And I forgot to tell you the fact that my dad's alcoholic, and I started drinking very early, and we became drinking buddies, and him and I would drink together and hide from my mom, and, I would steal his money, and I would, talk bad about him. I wasn't the son that I should have been, right? So there's always two sides of that coin, right? And thank God for Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps and a good sponsor who can flip that coin and help me to see the other side, right? So when I got here and I got into the work, I was able to see that I wasn't the son that I should have been. Right? I could have been a better son. I could have done things differently. So I was able to see where I step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate, right? And, I heard some speakers say on some tape, oh, that's what I used to do. When I was on my last share, when I was Mr. AA, I would listen to speaker tapes and go into meetings and spit it like it was mine, right? And you guys were like, man, this guy is something. I was so fake, man. But anyway, I heard one of these speakers say, the fourth column in the resentment inventory makes the second column a lie. And man, how true is that for me, right? And when I can look at my mistakes in these relationships, I can see that the harms that they've done to me are a figment of my imagination, right? And it was through this process that the lights were turned on and I was able to see the truth. And you know what I did? I made amends to my father. I paid him the money back. And I made a sincere emotional amends to him, and he never got sober. I distinctly remember that he told me he was proud of me. He was proud of me for getting sober. Because he saw where I'd been. I'd been to treatment multiple times, and he dropped me off at treatment. And he saw where my life had become, or what my life had become. And he always told me he was proud of me. And I'm thankful for that, because if anyone's sitting on amends in here, I would highly encourage you to do them, right? Because my dad drank himself to death when I was 5 years sober. He drank himself to death, And I was able to be at his funeral, and I was able to be present, and I was able to not have any of that hatred in my heart. I was able to be there for my mom and my brother. And it was only through this process, through God and the steps, man. I'm telling you guys the same answer that every other speaker's telling you, right? It's my experience, When I was able to get out of the way and take a step back and let God do His thing, and I focus on, doing His will and helping His kids, man. Everything else worked out. So I think that's probably the biggest example of forgiveness that I have. And I didn't do much. I just got out of the way and followed directions. Thanks.
Matt.
Man, alcoholic. Wow. The interesting thing is that you are sober for a period of time and work this program and making amends to a lot of people, then you go back out and hurt all those people you hurt the first time all over again, right?
I think that when I first got sober the first time, and my father kept showing up on my dad too. He kept showing up in my 4 steps, and it went on for like, I don't know, several years. And I would write this out, and I just couldn't get past some of the stuff that was going on. I mean, it was just this repetition. So every time I'd go in and write a 4-step, it would come up, it would come up, it would come up. And through a series of events and doing a lot of talking, a lot of therapy, and then some other stuff, I was able to kind of push through some of that stuff, and I got sober and was able to let my dad off the hook and for a lot of the stuff that had happened. And I'm a recovering Southern Baptist minister's son too, by the way, so I had that with and he was physically abusive when I was growing up in that household, so it was real confusing growing up and all that. And so it was just a lot of stuff wrapped around that. So if you fast forward a little bit, and we had gotten through, and I'd gone back and made an amends to my dad, and like I said, I relapsed and went back and went and hurt the same people all over again, and he was one of them. And so when I got sober this time, a year before I got sober, my sister died as a direct result of this disease, and so, and the way that I handled that was with no program. Of course, I picked up, and I got to the rooms, got sober, and started the process over again. And if you flash forward a little bit further along, and I was sitting at the apartment one night, and my wife came walking in. She just tears just falling out, just tired. My father was also one of us, untreated, and my wife was crying. She was terribly upset, and she said, "I need to tell you something." I said, "What's that?" And she said, "Your father just walked out into his garage and shot and killed himself." And I think 2.5, 3 years had passed since my sister had died. And the only difference between those two things at that point was I had processed my life through Alcoholics Anonymous, that I didn't have to drink this time over that situation. And it was painful and it hurt, and I didn't grieve well. I didn't do the funeral well. I didn't do any of that. But there was some of that hurt that there's no way to go back and try to repair some of that damage that was made and that I had created. And so I did some step work with the sponsor that I have now, and we're going through it, and I finally get on the other side of it. And the reality of it is it breaks my heart that my father was so miserable that he felt like that was his only way out. And I was able to see that for what it was. And so the process of just forgiveness and just letting that go, and the ability to walk through that as a sober man and be able to be an example to somebody else through that process. And what that looked like was, I told you I was working in this treatment center, and we had a patient that came in, and I really do honestly believe that nothing on God's earth happens by mistake. And so I'm at this treatment center, and there's a client that's in there, and one of the patients that knew what had happened to me, they said, "Would you please go out and talk to this young lady? She just found out her mother killed herself." And I went outside, and me and this girl sat down, and we had this conversation, and we were talking with one another, and I just shared with her what I had went through and what I had walked through. And Ashley just picked up a year not too long ago, and she talks about the fact that the ability to talk to her and walk her through that process, and the forgiveness for my father, and the things that she saw through that she was able to stay sober, and she knew that she could walk that as a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys gave me that and gave her that. That's a direct result of what you do. But if I was still holding on to that, if I still had that ball, if I wasn't letting go, I couldn't have been of service like you guys have taught me how to do. I hope that's what you wanted. Thank you.
Sean, I'm an alcoholic. So forgiveness was something that was foreign to me when I came into recovery, and I don't know, everything that had ever happened in my life was still so heavy and so emotionally charged, and I still carried it all around. And when I was writing my 4th step, before I even did a 5th step, I did start finding a lot of forgiveness for other people, because I saw the truth about what I'd done, and I started to see the ways that I'd hurt other people. And that really was impactful. And it wasn't until, like, you know, they've talked about amends, that it wasn't until amends that things really started to get deep, where forgiveness was involved for me. And it didn't start in the way that I assumed it was going to either. The first, well, I'm going to tell a little bit about this. I had a few friends that I had had since high school, and they became my friends right when my alcoholism kicked off. And so they had been through all of it with me. They invited me to their important events, even though they knew I was going to ruin them and all the things. They stuck by me. And eventually they couldn't really watch me kill myself anymore, so they kind of backed away. And they were on my men's list, and I really had minimal contact with them. Some I had no contact at all anymore. And one of them was coming to town for a high school reunion, and I'd just gotten, you know, the 8th step done, and I was ready to start making amends. And I talked to my sponsor about it, because she had talked to me about it being God's timing. And so I reached out to her, and I met up with my friend, and we went on a walk around the park. And I just kind of told her, you know, what damage I had done to them, and how I'd harmed them emotionally, how I hadn't been able to be a good friend for them, you know, how there were so many things that I'd wish I'd done different. And she was just supportive, you know, she was super supportive, and she told me just to keep doing what I was doing. And it went really well. We talked for a really long time, and when I got back in the car to go home, which at that time was a sober living house, I just started bawling, and I didn't understand what was happening. And like, it was just such a deep emotional reaction. And something happened to me that had literally never happened to me before. All the shame and the guilt from that stuff in high school, those parties, those situations I ruined, you know, those weddings, those graduation parties, you know, all these things, that stuff healed, and I didn't feel ashamed anymore. Like, it actually, for the first time, something became part of my life story, and it didn't feel like some, you know, albatross around my neck anymore. And so that started the whole chain of events of forgiveness for me. And I didn't realize that until I started to let go of some of those things, including forgiving myself for some of those things, that I was still going to be really hard on everybody else, you know. It never occurred to me that the way my voice inside of my head was always telling me how terrible I was, and, you know, all the records that would play, that I kind of projected that on everybody else too. And it started to unravel that ball I was talking about earlier a little bit more, you know. And I got to rebuild those friendships with my friends. And that same friend, you know, just last year, my husband and I were going on a cruise with some recovery people, and we went and stayed at her house in Florida, and we had a great time with her and her husband. And, you know, I get to have these friends for 30 years that I completely blew those friendships up, but they are back in my life today, and they mean the world to me. And that particular friend, Georgiana, she is a doctor, and she was an ER doctor for a long time. And she was able to start calling me when she had patients that she didn't know how to help, and say, you know, like, I don't know what to say to these people. What can I say to them? How can I help them, you know? And there was another friend in that group that was a little bit of a harder case, and literally I had no phone numbers, addresses, nothing for her. So I sent a letter through another friend to her, and a couple weeks ago, her and her husband were in town, and me and my husband went and had dinner with her and her husband, and, you know, it's wonderful. And that same friend, she has a nephew who, in one of my jobs in recovery, I was able to go visit in jail and help him get into treatment and into sober living and stuff. So it's really beautiful, because now I'm not the person they're scared to invite anymore. I'm the person they call when somebody they know needs help. And that's really cool, you know. So I don't know if I really answered the right question, but that's what came to mind for me. So thank you.
Okay. All right. So the next one is going to be give us an example of the dark past becoming your greatest possession you have. And we will start with Matt. Example of the dark past becoming your greatest possession you have. It's in the big book.
Yeah.
Examples.
Matt, I'll go.
There's a big book too.
Man, we should give us a script or something. Man, I mean, isn't that what we do here? I can't think of any other. The only thing I know is that, you know, when I first got sober, I had one of those. I got sober in Bowling Green, Kentucky, to start with, by the way. And so, and my sponsor at the time, Harold, and you know, he was like, "Man, I only know one way to do this, and it's through the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous." And we started this process, and we started going through the book and going through the steps, and as we're going through that, and you know, I don't know about you guys. When I got here, I mean, I just didn't want to drink anymore. You know, I didn't know there was more to it, right? I just, one day without a drink, if I could just pull one day off, it would have been fantastic. And I get in here and I hang around for a little bit, and y'all go, no, there's more to it than just not drinking. As a matter of fact, that's pretty far down the list on what it is we do here. And so, as Harold and I are going through the steps, and you know, I'm still confused about some of these things, and you know, with my core problem being selfishness and self-centeredness, and not wanting to. I'm so self-absorbed, and so as we're going through this and we're talking about it, and I'm sharing my story with my sponsor, and I'm telling him, you know, these are the things that I walked through, you know, and. Here's a man that I know very little about, and I'm sharing a fifth step with a guy that I have just met. I mean, this is just not something you do, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm telling him all this information. And when I got through doing my fifth step with my sponsor, he did something really strange, and which I do with the men that I sponsor today. And he stood up and he came around the table and he picked me up. And if you know, he was a big old guy. And he picked me up and hugged my neck, and he said, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous." And which confused me at the time, right? What do you mean, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous? I've been here for 3 months. You know, I've been coming around for a little while. What do you mean, welcome to AA? He said, "Matt, most people don't get this far. Or a lot of people don't get this far." And he said, "But what you're going to find is," he said, "that, you know, and a lot of the things that you shared with me and the stuff that you're ashamed of and the things that you did and the pain that you created." And he said, "What's going to happen is very simple." He said, "You're going to be sitting in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting one day." And he said, "This guy's going to come sit through the door, and he's going to be sitting down in a chair, and he's going to start telling a story. And that story is going to sound something like this. I was a preacher's kid. And I was abused, and I did this, and I've been in and out of relationships, I've been in and out of this, and all these different things that go along." And he said, guess who gets to talk to that guy? Guess who gets to talk to that guy, right? And I can't tell you how many times this has happened, where I was sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and some man comes walking through the door, and he's telling my story. Guess who got to help that guy? You know, that's our job here. Is what I do is I go and I carry this message that you guys gave me to carry, and I tell him how I got out from under and how you guys had shown me to get out from under. Since I've been sober this time, I've had 2 different occasions with people with multiple years of sobriety came to me and said, "Hey, will you show me how to do this?" I'm sponsoring a guy now that's been sober longer than I have. He said, "Because I don't want to do what you did."
So how does my dark past become our greatest asset? You guys taught me to use that to help others. And that is what we do here. I was thinking about that when I was sitting down over there. I got a friend of mine, Tom, that says all the time, he says, nothing's wasted in God's economy. And, these things that happen to us, and again, the reason is because, again, I don't think it's an accident. I can reach people you can't reach. You can reach people I can't reach because we all have a story, because there's going to be that person that walks through that door that he's going to have to hear it from me, or he's going to have to hear it from you. And you've got their story, and you're going to be the one that gets to help them. And it's because of our dark past that we're able to do that. I love that part in the book, too. I'll get the page number wrong, but it says, so cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. Outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into merriment over a seemingly tragic incident. But why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered and been given the power to help others, right? And that's exactly what we do here. Thank you.
Shauna.
Really mixing it up. Sean, I'm an alcoholic. So I have 3 children, and when I got sober, they were 3, 8, and 11, and now they are 12, 17, and 20. And so obviously, I didn't get sober when I first had kids, and my mom had a lot of strong views about a lot of things. And one of them that she really impressed upon me was that if you're not a good mother, that you are of little value to this world. And that is kind of what happened to me as a mom. When I first decided to have children and had my son, my alcoholism was not super far progressed. And so I was really a good mom by in a lot of ways. But I worked full time, and he was in daycare, and I had all this guilt from that. And I was kind of fueled by anxiety, as I had been my whole life. I'm not sure that's completely different now, but it's a lot better than it used to be. And after my son, when I had my second child, my daughter, something unraveled in me. And it occurred to me that I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to be a mom. I didn't know how to be an adult. I didn't know how to be a wife. I didn't know how to be an employee. I didn't know how to be anything that I was supposed to be. And as I treated that malady that I was experiencing with more and more substances, I started to become a kind of mom that it never even occurred to me might happen to me, honestly. I had left my ex-husband because I decided that my problem was him, not me. And so I had left my ex-husband, and we were sharing custody of the kids. And it started to feel like when the kids were with me that they were like a burden. And I didn't want to have to take care of my own kids when they were with me. And I stopped being reliable and dependable. I wasn't picking them up when I was supposed to. I wasn't showing up where I was supposed to. And that snowballed, and things got worse and worse. And so when I first got into recovery, they lived mostly with their dad. And I really got to a place when I was in treatment where I realized that was what was best for them. And, that was like a level of shame that I didn't think that I would ever overcome either. And the way that I overcame it was everything else in recovery, one day at a time, honestly. The first time that I went to visit with the kids after I was out of treatment when I was in sober living, their dad was present the whole time. We were at a McDonald's Playland or something, and I was so stressed out, I couldn't wait to be done with the interaction, And so I did that for a while. I would go and have these supervised visits essentially, and then they would start to come and stay with me for a bit. Then they would stay with me for a weekend, and it progressed. And the the recovery with the kids has looked different for each one of them because their ages were so different. And over time, I've gotten to make direct amends to them, but I've also been able to make living amends to them. And I can say today that when I'm helping another woman who's struggling with her, the way that her parenting didn't go the way she planned for it to go, you know, I can really be helpful in those situations. When I'm working with women that are in the process of rebuilding their relationships with the kids, I can really be helpful with that. And, you know, I don't know, parenting's really difficult. It's not an easy thing. I don't think it's an easy thing for anybody, though. I don't think that's unique to people that are in recovery. I don't think that that's unique to people that are alcoholics. But I can say today, because of the program and because of the fact that I have worked the steps with a sponsor and I try to be of service and I try to continue doing the work on a deeper level, when my kids have emotional, deep things that they want to talk to somebody about, I'm the parent that they go to with that, you know. When they are experiencing any kind of feelings, I'm the person they want to talk to about that. And I'm glad that as they've healed and as I've healed, that I've gotten to kind of show them the principles of the program, you know, and show them a way to live. And it's been wonderful to have a set of tools to work with, because I've always felt unqualified for everything I've ever done in my life, you know, always have. And I felt really unqualified to be a parent. I blamed that on the way that I grew up, but really, you know, my alcoholism just touched every aspect of my life, and I didn't know how. And I didn't know how to tell somebody that I didn't know how so that they could teach me either. So that was a big handicap for me. I don't know. The thing, in a month, my husband and I are going on this couples trip to the beach with my 17-year-old and her boyfriend and my 20-year-old and his girlfriend. And other than the fact that they needed somebody over 25 to get the Airbnb, they chose us to go, you know, and that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool that they want to spend time with us and that we have this relationship with them. And I'm glad that I get to share that part of my story with people that I'm helping too, because it looks different for all of us. You know, getting your kids back looks different for everybody. Some people don't. And I've had to learn that I have to be okay no matter what, you know, and AA has taught me that I can be okay no matter what. That as long as my dependence is on God, that I'm going to be okay. And there were years, we've got, the youngest one is in this time period now, but the years between like 12 and 15 are particularly painful, or they have been with my children anyway. So there were time periods where I thought, you know, they're going to hate me forever. And with the oldest two, that's not how it is. I'm not sure about the youngest one yet. It's too early to tell, but anyway, that's where my mind went with this. Thank you, guys.
Ryan, alcoholic. Hey, everybody. How has my dark past been transmitted into my greatest asset? I think two things came to mind. The first one's obvious, right? It's how do I take my alcoholism and turn it into an asset in my life today? And I think it's obviously through sponsorship, right? We share our experience, strength, and hope with the newcomer, but I think it's in that order for a reason, right? I have to share my experience first so that this newcomer trusts me, because if he knows that I have the same problem, he'll trust my solution, right? And I think we have Dr. Silkworth to thank for that. You know, when Bill first had his spiritual experience, he was, you know, out on the town beating drunks over the head with God, and nobody responded to that. You know, he led with the solution when people didn't realize what the problem is. So I think because you guys taught me what it means to be an alcoholic, I'm able to use those facts. I'm armed with the facts about myself, right? That I can gain the confidence of a newcomer in an hour, right? And I think even just during that first meeting, if we can click on that level, and we can make eye contact, and I can share about my drinking, and I can share about the spiritual malady and the mental obsession, the physical allergy, and I can see him nodding his head, and he can tell that I'm the real deal, that I've been there, that I know what I'm talking about, right? Because how many of us have been to well-meaning physicians, therapists, clergymen, trying to find an answer to this thing? And we sit across the table from somebody who has a lot of head knowledge but has not been in the trenches where we have, and it just doesn't transmit, right? It didn't transmit for me. So I think that's the number one example for me, and it's the simplest example, right? I use my alcoholism and the way to recover, the 12 steps to gain the confidence of a newcomer, and miracles happen because of that, right? I'm the vessel, right? God works through me in that respect. And another thing that I was thinking of is during the fourth and fifth step process, in my sponsorship lineage, we share secrets that we've been keeping during the fifth step, right? And, Ben, it all started back with Ben when I did my first fifth step ever, he told me, we're going to talk about secrets. And as soon as he said the word secrets, these things started coming to my brain like, oh my gosh, I don't want to tell him that. I'm not going to tell him that. I'm not telling anybody that, right? And we sat down at the table, and he starts telling me his secrets. And I'm like, man, I don't feel so alone anymore, right? I start feeling comfortable in my own skin because he starts to expose himself to me first. He starts to get intimate with me first. And that meant the world to me. It helped me to open up and share some of these things. And if you guys have ever heard of fifth step before, it's all the same stuff. It's this weird sexual stuff we've all done that we're holding on to, and we think nobody else has done it, and we're so ashamed of it. And I've heard a lot of fifth steps, and it's all the same stuff, man. I'm just begging to hear something new next time, But Ben taught me that, and I'm sure his sponsor taught him that too, that, I'm able to share these things. And I would share some of this stuff from the podium if Lee wasn't recording it, but and I share these things. I share these things with these guys when I hear a fifth step, and I lead with it, and we do the secrets first. I don't want to hear about your resentments, your fears, your relationship inventory when all you're thinking about is that secret, that experience in the back of your head that you're so afraid to talk about because it's going to cloud the whole fifth step, right? So we go, all right, secrets now, let's go over them, and I share my secrets. And you can just see the weight of these things that people are holding just melt away from them. And I think that's how I can turn the outward manifestations of my character defects, which is the dark past that I have, into one of the greatest assets, because it's really cool to watch people get free of those things. That's all I got.
All right. I think that, doing it anonymously worked. I think they killed it. Just give them a hand. Yeah. I want to tell y'all, Matt, in 2005, 2006, I went to rehab at Cadus, and he came in and spoke at my rehab. And he was the only person I remember. I remember it because I was like, if anything can work for him, there's hope for me. But no, he always made an impression on recovery for me. And I'm always grateful for men and women that take meetings in the treatment centers and jails, because people like me need that hope. So, and then let's close this with the Lord's Prayer.